Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting for a few more people to make their way in. So come on in, grab your coffee, and get set here. Right. Looks like we have a pretty full house here, which is great. And Corey, just give me the thumbs up when you think we're good to go.
Yeah, just a few more, but yeah, you should be good to go.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us here today for our Nonprofit Essentials Workshop series. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Colby Cyrus. I'm a program officer here at the Central New York Community Foundation. Part of my role is to develop this workshop series. So I get to work with speakers like Maria to, develop content that's relevant to the nonprofit sector here in CNY. So the focus of the presentation today is strategic sustainability. And we're really happy to have Maria Fibaget of Free Dog Consulting here with us to talk about this. And before I hand it over to Maria, I do just want to mention we have more workshops coming in 2026. We are actively planning sessions around AI, crisis communications, a bunch of other really important topics as well. So please do be on the lookout for those in the near future. Make sure that you're on our mailing list and following us on social so that you don't miss out. I do have some housekeeping notes for you. Just to note that this session will be recorded and shared out afterwards with everyone who registered. We will also be sharing the slides alongside some additional materials as well that you'll be seeing throughout the presentation today. If you have questions, please feel free to submit them using the chat function or just come off mute and ask. Maria is happy to answer questions throughout the session, and we will be monitoring the chat as well. We'll make sure that we don't miss anything. If you choose, please use the raise hand feature, and we'll make sure that we don't miss anybody there. My colleagues, Corey and Paris, are also monitoring the chat as well. So you can message them directly if you have any issues during the presentation. And last but not least, at the end of the presentation, you'll see a QR code for a survey to evaluate our session. This is really important, and it only takes a couple of seconds for you to do. This really helps us understand what worked well, what could be done better, and most importantly, what other topics that you'd like to see covered in future sessions. So that really helps us develop these workshops in the future. So if you could do that, that would be greatly appreciated. And if you complete that survey within 24 hours of the end of the session, you will be entered for a chance to receive 1 free hour of technical assistance one-on-one with Maria before June 30th. So please do our survey and don't miss out on that opportunity for some one-on-one time with Maria. That's all I have for you this morning. I'm going to hand it over to the expert, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Maria, take it away.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I know it's a chilly morning in Central New York. I'm down in Virginia, but trust me, it's 38 degrees here too. So I'm feeling your pain, but I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Yeah, great. We've got a big room here, and just a couple of pieces that Colby's already alluded to as well. I like to keep this as informal and interactive as possible. So it's a lot of information to present, but drop in the chat if you have something you'd like to just even think about. If you have an example of something we're talking about. I feel like peer learning is always one of the best ways for folks to be able to learn from this type of work. So feel free and to drop in. And of course, I know you're all have about 20 other things on your head this morning and working. So pop in, pop out, do what you need to do. We will be taking a break, but we also have a couple of break rooms this morning as well. And in those break rooms, you'll get a chance to really work one-on-one with some of your peers and talk about maybe things that have worked for your organization, things that haven't worked for your organization, and kind of where you're going. So I'm looking forward to talking to you about strategic sustainability. And we're going to be using, as we jump in, which we're going to be jumping into as soon as I can pull it back up on my screen. For some reason, it jumped to all of you, which you all look great, by the way, today. There we go. Everybody, can you all see the screen? And I'm going to get rid of that. Can you all see the presentation?
You can.
Okay. So we're jumping in, and strategic sustainability. What we're talking about today is, many times folks are doing strategic plans, or you're maybe planning a fund development plan, a marketing plan, whatever it might be. But how do you do that? We always, organizations all the time will come and say, we're doing a strategic planning session. And I love that. I'm always, excited to see strategic planning sessions. I'm always excited to see what organizations might be developing. That said, how do you start your strategic planning can always be one of the pieces that really throws people. And so we're going to be talking about using the Nonprofit Lifecycles model today to do that. And so my first question, we have a poll question that will help me kind of understand where I'm going today with this is, Paris, we're going to do the first one is, are you familiar with the Nonprofit Lifecycles model for organizational capacity building? So I'll give everybody a chance to jump in on this. Okay, we've got almost full participation on that. And it looks like, it's jumping a little, but 100% answered. Okay, so it looks like 38% yes, 62% no. So, okay, that helps me know. And so this model we're going to talk about today is going to help you understand for a lot of things where you would start. And this is for all of your planning in your organization. If you come away with nothing else today, I hope you come away with the culture of planning. If nothing else, if that's the only thing you learn today, it's about we have to plan, we have to get our organization into that. So moving forward, strategic planning, what is it? It's a roadmap. A strategic plan is where you figure out, how does my organization move forward? How does my organization build a roadmap and a game plan, so to speak, for its vision, its mission, and its values. More importantly, to deliver those. So I'm going to ask you another poll question before we jump on. Thinking about a strategic plan as a roadmap. Does your organization currently have a strategic plan? Or it could be a business plan or something like that. But what I want to know is it utilized on a regular basis? Not only do you have one, but is it actually something you use as a roadmap and it guides your organization and the good work, both of the board and the management staff? Okay, it's about half each way, a little less on the yes, but about half. So not surprising. And about half, I'm guessing some of you might even have one, but it's just not utilized on a regular basis. So very, very common for strategic plans to become what I call shelf art. In other words, it gets done. You spend lots of time on it. Your staff does, your stakeholders, your board, whoever. Maybe you're working with a consultant on it. And then it loses momentum and it becomes something that sits on a shelf. It's basically on your bookshelf. And when that happens, it loses all its impact. That said, it also happens because many times organizations do strategic plans that are too lengthy. They're 5 years sometimes. I don't know about you, but think 5 years ago what you were doing in life and how things looked. Very different than they look now. And 5 years from now, it will probably be the same thing. So I'm not such a big fan. I'm not saying you can't do a 5-year plan. To be honest with you, though, just a tip, I'm not a fan of it. And for you organizations, you're going to learn today about where you're a little bit more about plugging in where your life cycle is, your organization's kind of where it sits. If you're in an early startup or even early growth, doing a 5-year plan, I would highly recommend is a no. Don't do it. I would highly recommend you don't even consider it because life's going to change a lot. So let's talk about why that looks like that. That's organizational capacity and sustainability. If you have great capacity in your organization, and we're going to talk a little bit in a minute, about what capacity looks like. If you have great capacity, you can do things that are more long term. But if you're still building that, and that's perfectly fine. And actually, there's a lot of organizations that are quite robust and healthy that are constantly building capacity. Nothing wrong with that. You really need to look at things in a smaller picture. And so that organizational capacity determines if you can actually execute a strategic plan. Think of it this way. If I'm going to make, I don't really bake. I love to cook, but I don't bake. I'm a horrible baker. And one of the reasons I'm a horrible baker is I never look at the recipe list ahead of time. And then when I look and I see the ingredients, I'm like, oh, I don't have that. Oh, I don't have that. And I try to substitute, and that doesn't always work out so well in baking. Regular cooking, sure, you can do that. And baking requires a lot of measuring and being aware of what you're doing. It's a science. It's the same thing in organizational capacity.
Welcome.
You really need to know what you have already and what you need. And I would also use the other example of, we all use our GPS in our cars to get places now. The days of unfolding the big map. I can remember my dad like unfolding this huge map while he was driving in the car, of course. And you're looking at that, and those days are over. So how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you're starting? And don't you have to like have the GPS know where you're starting from? Or maybe you're doing MapQuest, trying to figure out or ways where you're going to, how long it's going to take you to get somewhere. You put in where you're starting from, and then it tells you where you're ending. It's the same thing. That roadmap is all about the organization's capacity. And the next thing we're going to learn about, and this is the life cycles model, is what is capacity and what are the components for an organization to have great capacity? What does that look like? Capacity equals sustainability. We continually in the nonprofit world talk about, what do I do that's sustainable? Not just my programs. How is my funding sustainable? How is my board strong and sustainable? How is my staff, my management, my executive team sustainable? How do I keep them? How do I keep having them learn and grow? That's all sustainability. That said, you have to have capacity for sustainability. You will never, ever have great sustainability and resilience without good capacity. It's just an impossibility. Literally not something you can do. Any thoughts, questions, anything on that so far, or anything anybody wants to jump in with? And just feel free. I can't see all of you. There's so many. So if you raise your hand, and somebody at the foundation might catch it for me.
I don't see anything at the moment, Maria, but I'll let you know if
Okay,
anything
cool.
pops up.
All right. So moving forward then, so we're talking about how do I do a strategic plan, but more importantly, how do I get started? And to do that, I need to know where I'm starting from. I got to start from somewhere, whether it's the recipe book to bake a cake, got to have something to start from, or I'm traveling somewhere. Where am I starting? What's my itinerary look like? So that said, for some reason, I'm not moving forward. Let's see. There we go. Okay. This is the life cycles model in a picture. I love this because to me, I'm a visual learner, and particularly virtually, visual helps me a lot. And oh, just a quick thing, you will get a handout of this presentation sent to you, as well as some of these slides that are particularly something that might be great for you to share back at your organization. So you will get, for instance, this tabletop, we call it in the nonprofit life cycles world. And some of you that said you're familiar with life cycles, I'm sure have seen this for many years. So there's been a couple updates to it back in like 2020, 2019, but this is what it is. And this is the nonprofit life cycles model based on the model that Dr. Susan Kenny-Stevens created, developed, further developed. And I've got to say, when I was trained in this as a consultant, light bulbs went off for me. It was something that allowed me to then take this information to my clients in a really easy way to explain. So let's just think about it. Here's a table, and there's 4 legs on it. And it's not the best. Everybody always says to me, it's not really 3D. I know, but I didn't draw it. And if I drew it, you wouldn't be able to even tell what it is. But on top, the tabletop, you see that like kind of gold yellow part is the programs. All of you have programs and services you offer to meet some need in your community. And you want that tabletop to be strong. You want your programs to be strong. You want them to be robust. You want them to support, whatever that need is in your community and to continually meet it. It might need to change now and then. It might need to, evolve with what your community's needs are. But those programs sit, they are the table. And below that are 4 table legs, and above it is the mission. There's a flower pot there with the mission and a plant growing. So that's a nice sturdy table there. And it's got 4 table legs. One is management, which really is your staff. It's everybody from whoever does whatever it is needs to be done on a daily basis to the executive team. That's your management. It could even be volunteers. If you are an agency or organization that depends very heavily on volunteers and they're part of your daily business, then that's fine. That could be part of that management table leg too. I would think of something like a Meals on Wheels. If their volunteers aren't out there delivering, they cannot really execute their mission totally. So they would be under that leg. The next one is governance. That's your board. It's not just who sits on the board, it's how they govern. What type of board is it? Does it need to be a working board? Maybe that's where you sit in your organization. Does it need to be a board that's more a governing board? Does it need to be a kind of a mesh of both, kind of a mix? But governance is also your committees, it's compliance, it's the compliance with state and federal things, it's compliance if you get grants that have compliance issues on them. Whatever it is, that's all governance. The next is your business model. That's your 3rd table leg. Your business model, and this table leg, some of you that learned this model a long time ago, it used to be called finance or financial resources. That was changed because when we think of finance, we just think of the money coming in, money coming out. We think of straight donations or maybe grants. And so many organizations have changed now to also have business models that include fee for services, social entrepreneurship. When you think of like Habitat for Humanity has restores. Restores are really a social entrepreneurship piece. It's a way for them to make money, but it's also not, it ties into the mission, but very loosely, it's a business. It's like a subsidiary business. That's part of a business model. Your business model is how do you get what's your revenue sources? How do you get them? A fund development plan goes under your business model. What's your public relations and marketing look like? What's your projections of cash flow? That's a business model. And also, what are your goals around how you will, as an organization, do business? Are there goals of maybe starting a separate kind of piece to help fund things? Someone put, when they registered, I saw, they said, I'd like to talk about, like, they didn't put social entrepreneurship, but that's what they were talking about, was like fee for services or how do we, do other things. Those are perfectly fine. And the last 20 years, they've really risen to the top in a lot of nonprofit organizations. There used to be a thing where people thought, well, we can't do that because that could jeopardize our IRS status. No, it can be done as long as it's crafted properly. And that's where your governance and compliance table leg comes in. So your business model is how do we do business and how do we also do business on our expenses? How do we spend money under our programs? How do we project what that's going to look like? What's my business model? It'd be no different than you decide to open a restaurant and you're going to go to the bank for a loan. You got to develop a business plan. What's my income look like? What are my projections? Who do I need to do the work? How will the work get done? A timeline, accountability, and what are my expenses against that? That's a business model. Nonprofits that run with a business model while still having heart in the mission are the most successful, always, hands down. The last table leg is really important as well, is your administrative systems. And when we think of administrative systems, we think of like technology, maybe it's your filing system, could be paper, could be electronic. Marketing is also an administrative system. How do you market? What's that look like? What's the budgeting look like? What are the finances around that? What are the systems to put that in place? And then the next thing around that is also fund development. While actually getting the money and what do your diverse funding look like is your business model, the administrative system of how do I track it? How do I thank donors? How do I report for grants? Whatever that is, that's your administrative systems. Many times administrative systems suffer the most when capacity is weak. We don't have the money to upgrade. We get by with, well, we've done it that way. We can still put it on paper and get around it. We just don't have those great systems in play because you can kind of get by. Eventually, it will come to haunt you, 100%. So looking at the table, looking at the four legs, they're all important. Are they all always going to be as strong one to the other? Probably not. You could lose a key staff member. That's going to shake up the management one, the staff management table leg. You could have a board change. That might shake that one up. Whatever it might be, your business model might take a hit somehow. Whatever it might be, they're not always all the same. But your goal as a leader in an organization is to create as even as possible strong table legs to support those programs. Even if it means sometimes they aren't as, we can't really develop as much as we'd like, but you're paying attention to it. And honestly, that is part of the planning. You've got to know where they sit before you get into your strategic planning. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You've got to. If you start doing a strategic plan that includes a whole bunch of staff changes and you've got a weak management and staff table leg, it's going to fail. You're wasting your time. So those are the things you've got to figure out. I can tell you from experience, I used to think the governance table leg, and so my apologies to anybody who's a board member in today's workshop. I used to think that was a table leg that wasn't as important. And then I got a real eye opener as an executive director because I had a very nice board. I had a board who cared, but they were weak in execution. They just wanted to come, rubber stamp things, and walk. And I was in an organization that was in a decline at one point. I had taken over as a new exec. Organization was in decline financially, staffing wise, administrative systems were non-existent. The business model was scary. I don't think there was one. And the board kind of didn't get it. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to have to, with a great team, work around them. And we did. And we turned it around and were successful. That said, it was never, hindsight's 2020. It was harder without the board. It wasn't as successful as it could have been, and it took far longer. So your board is critical. And I would honestly tell you, the board is probably, this needs to be the strongest table leg, because without it, it all trickles down. Any thoughts on this? And I would also, let me give you the last example to help understand. You get together with a bunch of friends and you go out to a great dinner. And have you ever sat at a table where it rocks? Like one table like it's kind of goofy and screwed up, and someone's trying to put like the sugar packet underneath it and whatever it is. And I'm a red wine drinker. And that red wine's going to end up on the front of me. There is no doubt in my mind. Whether it's I put my elbow on the table, I tend to use my hands a lot. I like sit back laughing and I hit it, and that table is shaky. I'm going to be wearing red wine. It's the same with this. That tabletop, that plant is going to tip. The water, the soil, everything in it is going to tip over. That's why you need strong capacity, strong table legs. So now we're going to look at the nonprofit life cycle stages. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you guys we're going to break into some breakout sessions to think about this. I'm going to give you a little more information first, though. So when we're talking about nonprofit stages, I won't get into all of them, but you can see on this curve, the first one's an idea. All nonprofits started out of an idea, and typically around someone's table or at a meeting. Somebody said, my gosh, our community needs this. We don't have this. Or maybe it's something government used to do and they can't do anymore, or they don't do anymore. We need this. We need this for our community. Maybe it's something with your children in your community. Life has changed and we're seeing different things. I'm thinking of like mental health of our children. There's a lot of things around that now. So all of that said, they start with an idea and they go into startup. And you'll see startup is the hill. It's where the curve starts going up. It's like walking uphill on an icy day, especially once you get into the growth phase. Holy cow. So many of the organizations in here today, I noticed when I was looking at the list and just knowing a little bit about some of you, are sitting probably right in growth at some point. When you are in growth phase, you are moving fast. There's high energy. Startup's the same. Startup kind of takes a little more time to hit that, but you are moving fast. You are walking uphill and trying to run carrying a heavy load. But it's also an exciting time, really exciting. But it's when you can make some really serious mistakes because it's trying to do too much too fast is the biggest pitfall of growth. It's the biggest pitfall even of startup. And that's where it becomes important to make sure the capacity is underneath. Because if it's not, the organization will begin to spin out of control. You'll lose people, people become disengaged, they'll think it's crazy, they'll, the whole 9 yards. Board members won't sit at the table, whatever it might be. The next one, right in the dead center at the pinnacle of the hill, is maturity. Maturity sounds great, and some organizations sit in there and do very well. But keep in mind with maturity, you're going to see on either side of it, there's vitality here, and there's regeneration. Whoop, I went back too fast. And I'm terrible at going backwards, so I'm just going to bug through it. Sorry. So with maturity, you have to be very careful, and I will get back there. Sorry. With maturity, you have to be very, very careful. Here we are in maturity. You have to be very careful that you don't lose momentum. You have to be very careful you don't become stagnant, not hitting the things your community needs, because it can become complacency. Everything's going great. You kind of sit back. Well, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I think everything's going great and I sit back, I usually get a big surprise somewhere down the line. It's important if you're going to sit in maturity that you're still keeping an eye on all the capacity. You're still looking at it. And it's a fine place to sit. There's nothing wrong with it as an organization. But you do have to, be sure as an organization in doing strategic planning for sustainability, that to be sustainable, you have to be relevant. You are still meeting relevant needs of your community then. With maturity, the left side is vitality. You're going into it really strong, the excitement of growth. The other side is regeneration, because you can go from maturity into decline without ever seeing it coming. And I'm sure all of you somewhere, a lot of you I saw on the list, you've been in the nonprofit world a while, many of you, and some of you may not, and that's fine too. In maturity, it's very easy to, like I said, get complacent, or maybe your board gets complacent, or your strategic plan looks the same every few years. At that point, you got to regenerate. If you don't regenerate, you're going to go downhill and hit decline. There are a few organizations I saw on the list that I would, just from some things I know, are probably sitting in decline or close to it. This is a really difficult space. It doesn't mean you can't fix it. It doesn't mean you can't make it work. But man, does it take a ton of energy. It's like sliding downhill on an icy day. I don't know about you guys. I'm not that young. I remember when cars were rear wheel drive, and I grew up on the top of a hill in the Adirondacks, and we had to turn into our driveway sharply. I cannot tell you how many times I remember sitting in the back seat as a kid and feeling the car slide backward. And then, my mother crying as she went into the snowbank. That's decline. It's a slow movement. You see it coming. It's like slow motion at that moment, even though it's probably not that slow. And there's nothing you can do but hit the embankment. Absolutely nothing. I don't know how many of you have ever been in that with your organization, and it could even be just one table leg going into decline. But this is the overall life cycle. From decline, you only have two places to go in your organization. One is turnaround, which you'll see the turnaround dotted line takes you back to early growth. You got to kind of restart. And it could be kind of maybe on this side of it. It could be in this side of it, but it's somewhere between late startup and growth. You can turn around. Turnaround takes tremendous energy. It takes tremendous capacity building initiatives. It takes the work of so many. It is nothing but teamwork. One person has to lead it. There needs to be that firecracker, that kind of, little engine that could. But man, does it take energy, and it doesn't. And there's always the 2 steps forward, 3 steps back in turnaround. It's tough. For many years, my expertise was as a turnaround consultant for a national organization, and I would go into different places and do that. And even myself as a consultant would get burned out very fast. The average turnaround executive makes it 18 months. That is based on the National Foundation of Philanthropy has put that out for many, many years. It has never changed. I remember 25 years ago when it was 18 months. It's still 18 months for a turnaround executive to make it through that and then leave. They're burnout. So we don't like turnaround. It affects capacity. But if you're in turnaround, that's when you rely on your stakeholders. You put the word out, you need help. The last place you can go from decline is terminal. That's it. If you go terminal, that's organization goes down. The only time terminal is something you want to see is if the organization no longer has relevancy, if the organization perhaps is going to merge. I've facilitated 2 mergers up in the North Country of New York with 2 organizations that were going to do a merger or be absorbed by somebody who could do it better or was already doing it better. That's okay. You're still meeting the mission. You're still making it happen. So those are the life cycle stages, and we're going to kind of condense it down now because as we're talking, here's the prerequisites to life cycles. This is, if you can remember even 1 or 2 of these, it will help. It's holistic. All the table legs matter. You just heard me talking about, like, to do a turnaround and get back to startup or growth, you've got to have a team. Everything matters. The management, the volunteers, the financials, the stakeholders, the systems, turning around. Most organizations that don't go into decline, 90% of the time, I would say, probably a good 90% have terrible systems. They've not been updated. Only one person knows them. There's no standards. There's no standard operating processes or SOPs, which is something, that's always been in the manufacturing world, but it works in nonprofits too. Whatever your financial report looks like, it should look like every single time, and more than one person needs to know how to deal with it. Life cycles approach to capacity building. It's not age or size dependent. You could be a 3-year organization. You could be a $1 million organization with 60 people working there. You could be a $100,000 organization with 2 people. Doesn't matter. The life cycles approach and model works with all of it. It's not evolutionary. It's not sequential. So in other words, you don't have to go startup, growth, maturity, then decline. You could go from startup to decline. You could go from maturity back to startup. It's not sequential. Certain pieces of it are, like I said, if you go terminal, it is what it is. If you're in an idea stage, it is what it is. But it's a really good diagnostic tool that takes you where you are and guides you forward. It helps you know where to start. And that part of it is very, very important, because if you don't know where you start, how do you get going? We talked about this earlier. So before we jump into a break room, I'll give you one last piece around some life cycles and benefits and expectations. This is why I like the program. It meets you where you are. What's your starting point? If you know your starting point as an organization and you say we're in startup, then that's how you do your strategic plan. You look at what do we need to do to build capacity and to make sure our plan is something we can handle. It's not just going to sit on the bookshelf. It's not going to frustrate people. It's going to be doable. We're going to make some real strides here. The life cycles model of capacity assessment and building, it sets realistic expectations. Like I said, you're not going to do a strategic plan that's ridiculous. I recently had someone call me about working on a strategic plan, and they wanted to do some really heavy lifting fund development, which included a capital campaign. They barely can make their budget now. They have no business doing a capital campaign. They don't even have it's somebody down here in Virginia, but they don't even have the confidence of their donors yet. Why would you ever spend money on a capital campaign? I would have loved to I would have loved to work for them and take their money, trust me, because they were a great organization, but also they were looking at something pretty significant. And I thought, you don't even have the money to do this. You don't have the capacity. You don't even have the people to execute it. What are you thinking? So I had to give them, I talked to them about that because I want them to be successful, but they were having a really hard time understanding that realistic expectation. Leaders here in these groups, that's your job. You have to set realistic expectations for the folks in your organization. The life cycles model is confidential. It recognizes when behaviors are out of sync. It involves everybody. The more people involved when you're talking about where does our organization sit on the life cycle, the more people, the more information you're gathering, the better. It builds organizational sustainability because of the capacity. It develops strong leaders in organizations. It gives you a tool. It gives you something to actually set your philosophy, your thoughts, your style on, and it depersonalizes management weaknesses, really anyone's weaknesses. If, I have my own weaknesses. I can jump sometimes to thinking of something really quickly and go, oh, it's this way. If I have to think about the life cycle in those table legs, it stops that. I'll give it organizations in startup and growth. Leaders sometimes get very excited about a new idea, a new program, and that can be a weakness or a strength. But in the case where it's a weakness, by using the capacity building model, which we're going to get into in a few minutes, a little more deeply, it allows you to kind of sit back and think for a minute and go, oh, we're not ready for that. So it diminishes your weakness, but more importantly, it depersonalizes it. It's not about, oh, Kathy is weak in that she makes decisions too fast or she doesn't make decisions too fast. Use the model, and there's a whole capacity question chart I'm going to give you as a tool, and it will stop that. And it creates a framework for the culture of planning internally. As I said earlier when we started, if you take nothing else away today, please take away that you have to plan. You have to have an internal culture of planning in your organization. Knee-jerk reactions don't work. When I was a director of the executive director of the organization many, many years ago over in the Capital District of New York, that was in decline when I took it over. They didn't tell me they were in decline, and I was too dumb to ask. And I was like my first exec job, and I was just excited. I didn't know they had a $400,000 embezzlement out of an $800,000 budget. I don't think they knew it was that great either until about 3 weeks after I was there. But regardless, they didn't tell me. I didn't know. I didn't live there. I didn't ask at the interview. Interestingly enough, we all get this information. We get some surprises. National Grid walks in to turn the power off in the building. It was a big building, had a daycare in it because they hadn't paid their bill. You name it, it was a disaster. And I'm sitting there really new and really kind of not knowing what to do and trying to figure out who's on the team that I can count on, who's not, what's the board, what's their involvement here, what's not their involvement, etc. And there was no planning. I said, okay, well, show me this, show me that. It was all just very old school planning. There wasn't anything really there. Everybody just knew they wanted to meet the mission, raise some money, and do a good job. That's not enough. There was no business model. And yet they had a huge 3-story building. They had a very robust children's daycare program. They had some other very robust programs for adults and health. And yet they didn't know what they were doing. That said, I realized right quickly, and I wish I had a model like this that I knew about then, I didn't, that there needed to be a framework. And so I went to people like the bank's business leader at our local bank. I went to people like another organization. How are you doing this? Don't ever hesitate to ask. And in this case, like organizations like your community foundation, you can go. They have people with great resources and great knowledge. Like this is where you have to help create that internal culture of planning. You need to involve everybody that you can possibly involve and make sure that, as you're involving them, that you absolutely are in trying to ensure that you're going to bring loyalty to what you're doing, that you're bringing them on board with you, whether it's on a small scale or a large scale, doesn't matter. So going back and thinking about, startup life cycle. And by the way, these life cycles can take years. Some organizations sit in growth, I was telling you earlier, forever. That is fine. There is nothing wrong with that. Growth is just regenerating, moving, energy. Some sit in maturity, some sit in startup. None of that matters as much as are you paying attention to it as you're doing your planning? Do you know where you're at? Do you know how to move forward? Are you planning something that's appropriate for what your organization needs, but also what you can handle? Recently, I had an organization I was working with that has a very deserving executive director who really was looking for a huge raise, but they deserve it. But the organization can't handle that. If they were to do that 3 months down the road, they're going to be laying people off. Is that building capacity? Absolutely not. At the same time, how do they balance making sure they keep that executive director who's been working so hard and so furiously to turn them around because they were in decline? So how do you balance that? That's planning. That's sitting down. That's talking. That's doing strategic planning. Absolutely. And that's going to be what's sustainable to keep the director, to not lay people off, to keep moving forward and build strength in the community. So then that strength turns into strength in the mission and the program delivery. Makes sense? Anything I'm saying that doesn't make sense, or anybody want to share a story? I'd love to hear from you. I'm looking at all of you. If anybody does, please put your hand up or anything and we'll catch it. Because I know everybody's had some stories. Nobody works in the nonprofit field without stories. That's for darn sure. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to jump into some break rooms and I'll try to visit as many of them as I can. But what I would love for you to do and talk about in your break room, and this is hopefully we won't have a lot of people from the same organization in the same room, but I think there's only a couple of you that have more than one person, so we're probably fine. What I would like you to do is just with what you know, and knowing that about almost half of you know a little bit about nonprofit life cycles already, or maybe know a lot about it. I would like each of you to maybe talk about where you feel your organization overall sits in its life cycle. Is it turning something around? And kind of overall, is it startup? Hey, we're getting going. And by the way, startup doesn't mean number of years. Don't forget that. You could be 20 years in the game and still be a startup, and that's fine. Maybe you reinvented yourself. But I want you to think about that. And I want you to, I have a question here I will answer before we jump in. And I want you to think about, where are we? Are we in maturity? But boy, they have a little scary. Like I think sometimes we get stagnant. I want you to guys have some chatting about that, just some peer learning. Somebody asked, can you speak more to depersonalized management weaknesses? And someone else said I have the same question. So yeah, let me answer that for you. So depersonalizing management weaknesses, and I think the best way I can speak to that is to give an example. So I'm gonna dovetail on what I was just telling you about. An executive director came into an organization in decline, is working really hard to turn it around, and at the same time, while turning it around, starting to burn out a little, really said, I need a raise. And again, it's merited, but does the organization have the money for it? At the same time, in that burnout phase, like all of us, starts getting, a little bit emotional, starts like conveying some of that emotion to staff. And now they're like her champion. They love that she's turning it around, but now she's kind of telling them too much, way more than they need to know. And I don't mean need to know, but like as an exec, there are things you just can't get into about your conversations with your board, et cetera, sometimes. So she made the mistake, and it's an honest mistake. It's when you're tired, it's when you're emotional, you're vulnerable. We are human. Our table leg of management staff volunteers is human. She made the mistake of probably saying too much to a couple of her staff who really love her dearly, who then got all upset and wanted to talk to the board, and more importantly, started going down this road of emotion, not, hey, this leader is great and this is why we need to support her. This is why she needs a better compensation package, whether it's money, time, benefits. This is why we need to work toward that in our organization. Instead, it turned into kind of a board against staff, which we've seen many times. I know I've been involved in it myself on both sides. Clash. And it concerned the board greatly that there was a breach of confidentiality, which it should. At the same time, I explained, particularly to this leader, here's where you made an error, but you did it because of the life cycle. The board is still sitting and the finances a bit in decline. You aren't. You're turning around. You and your staff are starting to grow. They're doing a whole bunch of things. But others, and not the people on the board, the process, there's no plan for business of how do we handle our exec? How do we create a compensation package long term? How do we do that even for all of our staff? So it depersonalizes the management weakness because she was like really beating herself up. I get it. I said to her, here's the deal. Yeah, it was a mistake. It was an error, but it's not about that. It's the life cycle. This wouldn't have happened if you were not a turnaround exec because there would never have been a reason for it to happen. So it depersonalizes management weaknesses, not by blaming it on the life cycle, but by saying to everybody, let's look at our life cycle. Where are we? And another way to say that is too, if you were looking, let's say you're an organization in startup. Most startups bring on really high energy leaders, whether it be the exec, program directors, even board members, whatever. You need that then. But startup leaders sometimes shoot from the hip and don't think it through. It's just part of startup. It's okay. It's a weakness. But if you know that's the life cycle, you work through that weakness, you plan through it, you think about it, you go, okay, that's something we need to have on our radar. Let's back it up. So hope that someone put very clear now. Thank you. Great. Okay, good. And please feel free again. After this, you guys have basically 2 weeks. You're going to get at the end an email that you can email me with any technical questions like these that are based on what we did today, based on the info you're going to get after as well. So if you have a question like that and need more clarification, feel free to email me and you'll get that later. So we're going to go into break rooms.
Maria, before we do that, could
Mhm.
you revisit the topic for the breakout room so I could put it in the chat for everybody?
Yes, thank you. The topic is, I would love for you guys to spend a few minutes chatting about where you think overall your organization sits in its life cycle right now before you start strategic planning. Like if we're going to strategic plan tomorrow, where does our organization currently sit overall? It's going to be a little wonky on some table legs in its life cycle.
We all set, ready to send them?
Ready to go.
All right.
So we're going to go into those and I'll try to visit as many as I can. And when we come back, we'll chat a little bit about it. Hey, everybody, we're back. Or you're jumping back in. I didn't get to visit all the rooms, but there was some really good conversation going on. And there was actually some connecting too of like, hey, email me, let me know what's going on, some partnering. I love that. That to me is like when I attend things like this, one of the best parts is meeting new people or learning what they're doing and kind of doing some, networking and partnering. So please feel free to do that throughout. That to me is a total win for this type of a workshop. Visited a little, and I'm gonna ask a couple of you to maybe chit chat in here a little. But one of the things one group was talking about that had a number of startups in it. It's talking about the board. And remember earlier I was saying that board table leg is so critical, and it's particularly in an organization knowing, is my board a working board? Is my board a governing board? Is it a combination? What do I need? Do I need a little bit of everything? And by the way, what about board being connectors to fundraising? They really should be. They really, and that's a whole nother training, but there is, not every board is going to get out there and specifically ask for dollars. Not every board member. That's fine. But boards are expected, board members, to be some type of a connector to support, to stakeholders. So I just have to throw that in there. It's a little off, but I have to throw it in there because it's something that is a capacity piece. Whether it's a working board or governing board, doesn't matter. They have to be able to connect to stakeholders in the community. And that's a public relations piece. It's not always about the money. Sometimes it's specifically public relations. That's okay. So one group was talking about, the difference between working board, governing board, and there was Diane, I think Diane Napa, if you don't mind, talk about like what you were saying about, how do you get your board to build that capacity of them, to have them involved and engaged and find out what they can do, what talents, what do they bring to the table? And you were talking about relationship building. Can you give us like a little bit of I think it's a great piece for capacity building, a little bit around that of what you do?
Right. So Elmcrest Children's Center has a very large board. And I found that I know one of the people in our group was talking about, how do you get your board to actually work, so to speak, because they're very busy and there's tasks that are put out there and they don't necessarily get done in a timely manner that's needed. So I found that developing relationships with your board members is important, on whatever level it is, whether it be professional or, whatever level it is new members that we have that come on. I make sure that I meet with them regularly. We have a pretty clear set of expectations for new board members. We have a lot of committees, and some committees meet twice a year. Some committees meet once a month. And so it's really meeting those people on where they're at in their life, professionally and personally, so that you can get what you need out of those people and you're not overextending them based on their own, their own lives. So I have found that has worked. Developing a relationship with folks, of meeting them where they are, really makes a difference when it comes to needing things that that you need done, tasks that you need done, and feeling comfortable enough to go back when the task is not done in a timely manner. And the other piece of this is usually every year, because we have a board of directors and we have a board of advisors. And I'm not a big person of, I want that person on the board because their name is, community name. So I go through our list of our board of advisors every year and reach out to people I haven't seen in a year or 2 years or whatever, just, to make sure that they're still engaged, because we need a working board.
Yeah, no, thank you, Diane. And that is, and I swear I didn't set her up, guys. You just said like meeting them where they are, finding out who they are, what their pieces are, that they bring to the table, their talents. The biggest disservice you do to a board member is to bring them on and not engage them. I've had that happen to myself. I've come on and they like don't know what to do, and I'm sitting there like, it's kind of like, have you ever started a new job and you know what you want to do, but you don't know what to do, and in fact you don't even know where the restroom is, and you're like, no one tells you. It's very uncomfortable. It's the same thing when you join a board. You're the new kid on the block. Why am I here? But more importantly, I love you said like revisiting even people for an advisory board. I love an advisory board. I love an advisory board or an advisory committee. It's not people that have to be totally engaged, and sometimes they don't even have time to do that, or they're not sure where they fit. It's a great way, though. They might have that one little carrot, that piece of knowledge that's a golden nugget. You bring them in as an advisor. It's a way to build committees. And so I really feel like, kudos to you. I feel like you're doing such a great job with that. But at the same time as well, you recognize we're still a working board, and you guys been around a long time. You're still a working board and should be. That's what works for Elmcrest. And that's what I'm trying to make sure we get out here. Everybody says, well, I want my board to become a governing board of like who's who on it. Not if that isn't going to be good for your organization. Every organization's different. If your life cycle is we need a working board because of the engagement and the changes we constantly have, and we stay in growth maturity, but we always revisit what's happening, then you need a working board. You don't just need a board of money, to be honest with you. That would do you no good. You don't just need a working board either. You kind of need that blend. And so it's a working board with different pieces. And that's where you're building capacity. Building capacity is building relationships with your board members. Building capacity is learning their talents, learning what they can bring to the table. And by the way, for those of you that are leaders or executive directors in the organization, there's nothing better than having one or two people on your board, and maybe it's your whole board, who you can now and then just say, hey, here's what's happening. I need some advice. Or, hey, I just need you to listen. Because I'm going to tell you now, your family is, when you go home, is tired of listening. I've been in this world for a long time on this type of nonprofit stuff. And there was a point where my husband was like, you need to not tell me this anymore, because it is so dear to your heart. It is so personal. Even your friends are like, oh, here she comes, here he comes. It's not. This is where your board can also be that sounding board. But when you pull them in, think about when somebody brings you into a relationship and it's equal. Think about, everybody's had a friend where it wasn't equal, where you were like always the one, putting things forward. You were the one reaching out. And after a while, you're like, this isn't really a good relationship. It's the same with your boards. And if you have board members who aren't interested in that, it's okay, but they probably shouldn't be on your board regardless of your life cycle. But for those of you in startup, growth, even maturity, as long as you're looking at your stuff being relevant, and actually every cycle, you need to build relationships with your board. When I counsel nonprofit directors, one of the capacity building pieces I have around governance is that they should be doing at least a 30-minute call, or if it can't happen all the time, I get it, but at least every other month with each board member. And then a couple times a year, take a board member to lunch, take a board member to coffee, somebody that maybe you feel is getting disengaged a little, and then someone you feel is really engaged. And by the way, a board mentoring program is a great way too. Let your board members help with that. A board member who's really engaged can mentor another board member, especially new ones coming in. If you don't engage board members immediately, you will not have them they might sit at the table, but they aren't going to be worth anything to your organization. And it's not because they're not worth it. It's because you haven't done the work. So that is a big, big, important piece for capacity building and governance. And that's why I wanted to highlight that from that conversation. Was everybody just kind of, you can do a reaction in your Zoom if you know how, down at the bottom. Everybody able to kind of identify where they sit overall in their life cycle? Awesome. And again, it's going to change. It should change. And pieces of it, it might be, well, this table leg is weak, this one's not. Did anybody identify they have like one table leg that's not even like it's down? It's gone. Like, we have to hit that one, because otherwise you're going to be wearing my red wine. Yeah, a lot of you. Very common. Don't flip out about it. But at the same time, how would you do strategic planning if you have that one? You can do it. But now that's one of the biggest pieces of your strategic planning. It has to be addressed above everything else. So when you start your strategic planning, you need to think about, you can only do so much. Let's say you have a 3-year plan you're going to do. You can only do so much. You're only human. You can't take away from your programs and services that need to continue. But what you can do is you evaluate overall life cycle, and then you evaluate which table legs are really suffering the most. And that's the biggest part of your planning, because you got to shore them up. So what we're going to do next is we're going to jump back into the presentation slides. I'm going to give a really quick overview of just some highlights when you sit in certain life cycles that might even help you identify some of those weaker table legs or stronger table legs. They can support each other. You're going to get this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you're going to get it in a handout, but just to give you an overview. Before you plan, there's a couple ways to go. You could do a full life cycles assessment. You could do a consultant facilitated nonprofit life cycles assessment, or you can just kind of do a mini one. That's okay internally. But no matter what, please do something. Don't just start spending time, energy, money on a strategic plan. Don't forget, time does cost you money. Don't start doing that until you have a little more knowledge of where that table sits for you, how those programs look. Are they robust? Are they going to fall down? Where are you at? Before I jump back in, anybody have anything? All righty, I'm going to jump back in. Come on. Mhm. All right. Everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. There we go. So I didn't put idea because I don't think any of you are in that stage anyways. And plus, like I said, I think it's pretty easy to understand. Excuse me. Startup, energy, passion, highest. Systems are usually behind. You don't even know what systems you need at that point, or you're kind of, figuring it out. Things are simple, they're experimental, you're figuring it out, low budget, bootstrap. That's early startup. You can be a late startup and, have a pretty good budget and all those pieces. Leaders are spark plugs. Usually a startup leader, and I know some of you are in this, even in the last group I was talking to, can do everything in the organization. You can do the program. You can do the, administrative stuff. That's a burnout way to go though. You got to figure it out. Systems are usually weak or they're outsourced to others. Outsourcing is okay, but it may not be something you can do long-term. The challenges are knowing when. I'm going to give there's two of them that I'm going to say are the biggest pieces. Knowing when to say no. That's through any phase of startup, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, knowing when to say no. Like, I stink at that one. I'm going to be honest with you. You got to learn to say no. It's important because also you lose other people along the way. Volunteers or staff will leave if they feel leaders don't know when to say no. They just can't take it. And living within financial means. There's always a risk. There's some risk with any business, whether it be a for-profit business or a nonprofit, of you have to take risks sometimes to move forward. But it's not your money. It's not your restaurant. It's not your store. It's a nonprofit. You got to live within your financial means, even if it means doing just a little bit, but doing it well and not growing things until you're ready. That's the biggest one of startup. Growth. Growth is when opportunity, so it could be good opportunity, service demands, what people want from you, what they need, what your community need is greater than where the capacity is yet, the structure. Sometimes it's sometimes pieces of it might be there, but you're trying to like blend it, develop it, and as you grow, you've got to consider that. Growth organizations absolutely need to do strategic planning more than anybody. They are ready for it, they need it, and it starts developing that culture of always having a plan. It starts, leaders trickle that down, whether it be board or executive team, trickle that down to everybody. Characteristics of growth, our board structure appears, or maybe is rolling along. Like maybe you have a great board, but now you're building committees, or you're going, oh, we don't need that committee. We're going to fix this one. Current systems and growth, they were never good to begin with. Now they must be substantially improved, or you're in the process of doing that, because as you expand how you did it before, there just isn't enough room. It's like for anybody out there that bought a house and you didn't have any children, and then you have children, you're like, oh, this house is not working. We got kids all over the place and toys and, their friends, and there's just not enough room. You got to figure it out. One of the keys of growth is management, or the executive people that are in charge or leading see infinite potential. They're not pessimists. They think this is what we could do, but this is why you need that plan, so that you don't do there's always too much to do with too little time when it comes down to growth. Always. Too much to do, too little time. I bet if I ask that poll question, everybody's going to say, yep, too much to do, too little time. As a leader, whether you're a leader in the organization as a staff person, whether you're a volunteer leader or a board, don't forget board or volunteers. Someone was pointing that out earlier in one of the chat rooms, break rooms. You have to understand that what you do, if you're always on this like hamster wheel and you're just like anxious and, oh my God, we have something to do, is going to trickle down to everybody else. You got to build structure. It's critical. The challenge of growth is building structure for everything. So it's really important that leadership is demonstrating that leadership is developing board ownership. So with what Diane was talking about, developing board ownership is having conversation. Having advisors is saying that's ownership. That's saying, hey, I want to talk to you about this. You've got some input that I think would be helpful. That is developing ownership. And the biggest challenge in growth, but has to begin, is diversifying your revenues while you manage the cash flow. Many organizations start out with one big seed money funding stream, a big event, a big grant, a big donor who says, I want to fund this. It's not going to be there later. So if we're talking strategic planning for sustainability, and I just told you it's not going to be there long term, it's not sustainable. You got to begin diversifying your revenues. That is very hard to do in startup. You're just not ready. You don't have enough systems. You don't have the credibility, the public relations. Sometimes you can. I'm not late startup, you can. Early, no. It's extremely hard to do in a decline because people have given up. It's extremely hard to do in turnaround because you're too busy with everything else, and there's not the confidence of stakeholders, funders, donors yet to put the money in. They got to see the turnaround. You know, we're a society of humans. And I'm like this too. I want to see, like, what are you telling me? I'm not just going to necessarily go, okay, that's what you're telling me. I want to see it. I want to see something, donors, especially. Donors have become very smart and savvy. A big part of my bread and butter is fund development and for years in my world and my nonprofit consulting. And I think donors, because their money is so much more critically, everybody's feeling a pinch. Every time we have an economic, concern or downturn, donors become even more savvy about their money. That's everybody from, Aunt Josie, who donates $25 to her favorite cause, to funders with money in the stock market. They've got to be. They've got to like really treat the money with much more care. You have to diversify revenue to grow. You cannot have all your eggs in one basket. That is just business 101, profit or nonprofit. Business 101. Diversifying revenue is a huge challenge in growth, though, because guess what? It includes leadership. It includes your board. As I said, boards are responsible for money. It includes the public stakeholders and people that fund you. It includes your clients and services. What are they saying about you? Because trust me, if they're not saying something good, nobody's giving you money. Aunt Josie or otherwise. Aunt Josie's going to say, I don't like you. And she'll be the one that says it. Mine will. I come from a big Italian family. Trust me, there's nothing sacred that doesn't get said. And if they don't like it, that's okay. But I forgot what it is, and someone might know, but there's that whole thing about in the community relations field or public relations, if someone has a negative comment, it goes to like 10 people. If you have a positive comment, only like 2 people hear it, which is totally true. We kind of sometimes as human beings aren't so great, aren't so kind, and we just talk about what we don't like and what didn't work. So if don't forget, in growth, your community and public relations is critical. If you're growing, people want to know what you're doing. You want to bring them into the fold, and how do you do that? How do you build loyalty? How do you build positive change? Because people are not comfortable with change. People will say they are. Most people are not comfortable with change. And whenever there's change, there's discomfort, almost always. That's actually a tenet of life cycles, of the nonprofit life cycles model. With significant change, there will be significant discomfort. Leaders, you have to manage that. That's why it's important to have your board, hanging out with you, right? Knowing what's going on. Maturity programs are well organized. They're in touch with the community needs. The board sets direction, but they can still be worker bees. Absolutely. They leave management, though. This is classic maturity. They do leave management to the exec for the most part, and they should. They leave the day-to-day management to the exec. They no longer have to be a worker bee in that sense. They're more of a worker bee now, maybe on committees of developing policy, developing systems, developing financial resources, and planning for the business model. Resources for mature organizations, they have multiple sources of income and are not dependent on one source. And another critical piece of mature organization resources is they know how to get the money at the table for cash flow purposes. So any of you who might be from the accounting world, or maybe your accountant has said it, there's an old phrase in the accounting world, cash is king. And what that means is not just someone hands you a $20 bill as opposed to a check. It's money in the bank. It's there. Cash is king. I cannot tell you how many organizations I know of who get money, maybe it's state funding, maybe it's voucher funding from some program, who are so far behind because they have antiquated systems or people aren't trained well to get their vouchering done, to get their money from a grant, the reimbursables. They're behind so far that their cash flow is a mess. Cash is not king with them. That hamstrings their staff or their ability to hire. That hamstrings their systems. They can't buy what they need. That hamstrings their programs and who they serve. That takes you right out of maturity the minute you don't have multiple sources of income. Or I should say, you're not tapping those sources of income on a in a timely manner with a system, so that if you win the lottery and go to Tahiti tomorrow and you're the poorest person who does that, someone else can pick it up. And I'm going to give you an example. I dealt with a few years ago, well, actually, time flies, probably 7-8 years ago. Wonderful organization, multi-state, growing like a weed on a July day. And on top of it all, some pieces in maturity, some totally startup and growth, new programs serving thousands of people. They were growing so fast, veterans. Anyways, really needed, really innovative. But multiple sources of income, doing a great job with that. All of that was going great. Great board. They were setting up a special, special committee or board for just fund development. They realized they really needed to look at major gifts. I mean, they were plowing right along. Talking about an endowment. They had gone from like 800,000. They were now at like 2.2 million. I couldn't believe how fast. And that's when I kind of came in. And they had pretty good systems, but not great. But what they didn't, and they had a real machine for public relations, a real machine, a real system, the right people, the board engaged in that, and that's how they were growing so fast. But their exec needed to leave for a personal matter, and you know, everybody was very sad about it. That exec left, and they took some steps back very quickly. It was expected they would take some, but not as many, because they had become person dependent, not position dependent. Any of you with founders, and any of you that are founders, I absolutely beg you to please start delegating more, start building systems, bringing other people in, because if you leave, you could tank the organization you gave birth to, literally. You have to do that. So challenge of maturity is, even those that aren't founders, things become very person dependent. That can also happen in turnaround. When you get a great turnaround person, things become person dependent. That's unfair to them, number one, on top of it all. But also, that's when you don't depersonalize. Remember, we talked about the life cycles model is to depersonalize management a bit. That's why you can't become person dependent. And that's for all of your positions, to be honest with you. And the other challenge of maturity is keeping staff motivated around the mission. That's where it can be bringing them in for conversation. Maybe you're going to tweak a program that runs really well, but hey, what can we do better? We can always do something better. Really important. Next one is decline. There's so many pieces to this. It makes my head go like this. Decision-making is horrible in decline. It's knee-jerk reactions. It's thinking everything's on fire, even when it might not be, just because you're in decline. And I used to, that organization where I walked into the embezzlement and all kinds of things, I had 75 staff. I had to lay 1/3 off my first week there because we couldn't pay them. National Grid's turning the lights off, you name it. Those are things that are emergencies. But then I found, once I started working through it, even like 3, 4, 5 months in when we had settled some things, staff was constantly, and the board, panicking. The littlest thing would happen. Maybe a client is unhappy with something, they would panic. Maybe we got a letter in the mail finding out some other utility is behind or some other vendor payment. Panic, total panic. People acting crazy. People, we need to do this. I'm calling so and so. It's like, stop this train. We have to have an emergency board meeting. I finally put a plaque on the wall that said, and I framed it, there are no emergencies except for the following: fire, profuse bleeding, open fracture. That's it. And then I put death is not an emergency, because it's not. I can't do anything about it. Because unfortunately, we also had a shelter and someone passed away overnight. And yes, we all had to take action, but it's not an emergency. Like, we still got 180 kids coming in here this morning. We just need to make things good for them and then work on the other. Because everybody was living in this constant panic state and would say, for lack of a better term, really dumb, stupid crap. I almost said the swear word, but out in the community, there was a small community of like 55,000, so not that big. Everybody would be so upset constantly. The employee morale was just horrible. I felt bad for everybody who had to work there. Every day must have been like sick to your stomach to come to work because nobody was happy. I actually let some of the staff go based on their unhappiness. They weren't happy with me for doing that, but I thought, you're so unhappy, there's no way we're going to get past this. And it's the same with board. When you're the board member sitting there constantly bringing up the negative, it's time to go. And if you're the exec dealing with that, it's time to have that conversation. And the way you can have that conversation with a board member is if you've already built a relationship with them, back to Diane's point, in a mature organization. Decline is so difficult. And just know, if you're there, the decision making is horrible. There probably aren't even great financials or reports or whatever it is, or data. How about data for programs? Is this program even relevant? I don't know. Nobody has data. All those pieces are falling apart. This is where you have to pick the one that's worst, the table leg, and start working on it. Blame game, holy cow, in decline. And I'm talking about this because I know some of the organizations in here have been in decline or are still working through it. The blame game is ridiculous. It's typically between board and staff, and then the other way. It can't continue. It gets heard in the public, and then no one wants to fund you. What you have to do is pick at least one table leg and start working on it. And I would always start with the board. And organizations say, well, I don't have any finances. I can't do anything. You still need a board. Legally, you need a board. At the end of the day, even just legally, you don't need finances, but you need a board legally. So that would be for anybody in that, my first thing. Start with the board, get it straightened out, move on. So those are the challenges there. There's diminished client, diminished status, but then let's talk about turnaround. This is the critical juncture. You either go, as an organization falls apart and totally either needs to merge, not be at the table anymore, and just, close up shop. By the way, you can't just close up shop as a nonprofit in New York. There are very strict rules around how that has to work out. And as a board member, you need to make sure those happen, or you can be held responsible and liable financially. And the other thing in turnaround is, this is when it takes the village. It's staffing, it's volunteers, and don't forget, board are volunteers. It's the board. It's willingness to cut expenses or cut programs. You got no business running every single program or trying to if you're turning around. If you have a child who comes home with a report card that all of a sudden tanked, and three classes, not one, they can't address all three at the same time. We have to be, it's ridiculous to think so. You move forward with one, you make a win there, people feel good, you go to the next one. It's the same thing in turnaround. The problem is, in turnaround, leadership, including board and management, always want to do everything at once. You can't. Turnaround stage requires a firecracker. It requires someone who takes no prisoners, who says, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. Let me bring you all into the fold close to me. We're going to make hard decisions. We're going to cut programs. We might just put them on hold. We might not cut them entirely, but you can't do everything. It's transparent, authentic leadership 101. It's people who are willing to have the hard conversations, aren't going to be worried about who might not like them. And more important, it's the one that's the most personal. You cannot have a life cycle stage of turnaround without personal relationships on board and leadership. You cannot. You have to restore credibility, and honesty and transparency are the only way to do it. And it's the only way stakeholders will come back to the table. And it takes time. It's a culture shift. It's a painful shift. And it typically involves losing programs and people that were once dear to the organization. It will not happen without that. It also requires you to assess your capacity to meet current market needs. What does your community need? So what does the community need? And what can we do? And that's a hard conversation. And the best way to do it is to involve who you serve. If you are an organization that feeds people, what do they need? What can we get by on? Have an honest conversation. We can't do everything. Here's what we can do. Does that work for you? Have those conversations. It's a great way to get moving forward. If you are a humane society and you're open admission, but all of a sudden you're in decline and can't take everybody, that's a horrible place to be. You know, myself, that's a background I have. You have to figure out, what can I do? And that's where you start bringing volunteers in to build foster programs, to do whatever it takes so that maybe you can't do everything. And how about partnering with others? And I see that happening a lot now. And I'm like, it's so encouraging throughout the United States. But this is something, it's an example we can all take back to the table of, I can't do everything, especially if we are in decline and turning around. How do we do this? How do we rely on, you know, communities are only as strong as their nonprofits. I really believe that. Some people will say they're only as strong as their business sector. They're only as strong as their financial banking sector. Those are all important. But nonprofits fit a gap. They fill a gap in all communities. And the strongest communities have strong nonprofits. And I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to Central New York people today. And I know, like, you know, I don't want you to like hate me or come after me. I feel Central New York, for all of its challenges and its financial challenges. I mean, two of the cities, Syracuse's zip codes are the poorest in the country per density. That said, and I say this, you can ask anybody outside the region, it is one of the strongest nonprofit communities I have ever seen. Ever. People come to each other's aid. Build on that. Don't just think, I don't want to ask this board member to do it. Build on it. You might get a no, so move on. But if you don't engage them and you don't bring them into the loyal fold that you're creating, you will not build capacity. So, all of that said, before we do a little break and come back and talk about really how am I going to put this in a strategic plan? Capacity alignment. So what I don't want you to think is every table leg has to look the same. We need all of our table legs in maturity. It'll never happen. It's like me saying at home, my whole house is clean at the same time, every room. It's a wish. I think it's happened like once ever, and it's probably before we moved into a house and had it clean. We just moved, and so I'm living in boxes, and I feel like totally stressed about it. And I always use that as an example of life cycle. Like right now, we move a lot. And right now I just have to I'm in the startup life cycle of where does everything go? I'll figure it out. So an organization and alignment, you can see here up in this first grid, programs are in high growth. Management, that's your team, that's your leaders, your workers, volunteers, are in growth solidly. Governance on this one, right on startup growth. That could be maybe you had an extraordinary board treasurer who left and now you got to get another one and you're training them. That could be maybe you've got a lot of new board members or you've got some that aren't as engaged. That's okay. It's still an alignment. It's not so far out that thinking in a different manner, that people are just not, all on the same page. Financial resources are in growth. They're pretty solid in there. Could be maybe a year ago they were more further in growth, but maybe you lost a grant. We're living in times now where so many organizations, the grants, especially state level and federal, are just not there of what was there before. People, disposable income has gone down tremendously. I don't know, did you guys hit over $4 a gallon for regular gas yet? We just hit it. I saw 4.18 here yesterday and I was like, whoa. That affects what people can give. Absolutely. It even affects their time. They may have to find a second job. They may have to work overtime, whatever. And oh, shoot. Okay. Well, I have no idea why that happened, but the technology gods came down on me. Back to that though. Administrative systems are in growth. Administrative systems do tend to stay more in an earlier growth a lot, even for organizations in alignment, because you're always changing them up. That still is an organization in capacity alignment. There's nothing there that I would walk into that organization and say, you're not ready to plan for sustainability, or you need to address this before you really hit the ground running. You're okay. There's some things to pay attention to, but they can be part of your plan. So in this case of alignment, we would look at the board governance as a big piece of the plan that needs to be like front and center, but it's in good shape. The next, and to think about why is it a little bit off? Is it because we have new board members? Is it because we had a really great leader that, has transitioned off? Is it whatever? The next one is out of alignment. This organization, these are actual assessments that were done, facilitated. This organization has high growth programs as well. We're thinking, okay, if I got high growth programs, there's a lot I need to support them, to keep that table up, keep those programs flush and flat. Management's in growth. Okay, maybe they got a new leader, but it's there. Governance, financial resources or the business model, admin systems are all in startup and not that far along. There is no way those programs will stay in high growth without a mess happening. Something will happen. Let me tell you the type of things that happen in this type of not the type of organization, but in an organization out of alignment in its life cycle. The financial resources are in startup. All of a sudden, they can no longer pay for certain programs. They have to start cutting back. They don't do it quick enough. It starts to affect the program. It starts to affect employee morale then, because nobody wants to do a job and feel they're not doing it well or meeting the need in the nonprofit world. They now all of a sudden have to make a big cut. It gets some publicity. There was a big cut. It affects donors. It affects credibility in the community. Admin systems cannot support the growth. Grant reports don't get in on time. Donor funding isn't solicited fast enough. The marketing isn't there. The staff is frustrated with data they have to input. The data's not there. The data supports a grant. The grant can't get the report written or apply for the next one. Vouchering falls apart if you're a program that has vouchering. You maybe have an event and there's a ticket system. Your admin system stinks. It can't handle it. Your website is an update. People can't get on it. They can't find resources. That's what happens when you're out of alignment for financial and admin systems. Governance, when it's out of sorts, isn't bringing the money, helping connect money to the org. People are making decisions without good financial reports in front of them. Or they're making decisions even with reports in front of them, but they really don't have education of what they're supposed to be doing. They aren't engaged. They aren't supporting the management, whatever it is. That's what happens in an in alignment versus out of alignment, or an out of alignment organization. Sorry, I said that backward. Versus one that is in alignment. Everyone concentrates on their services and programs, and rightly so. That's why you come to work. But if that's all you rely on, there will be major, major problems if those other pieces, if you're not paying attention. So in the strategic planning process, I encourage you to look back at those of you, about half of you or around, or 40% had past plans or current strategic plans right now you're working with. Please be sure to look and see, are they program heavy? Because if all you're doing, and it's the natural way to go, is looking at programs, There's a very big problem that you might miss planning for some of even up here. Some of these you might miss the components, the capacity components, the table leg planning. And when you miss that, eventually your programs are going to suffer and something's going to fall down and it's not going to be, it's going to be pretty significant. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, anything on that? $4.19 a gallon. Hey, we're on the same page. Yuck. Anybody have any thoughts about that? Being in alignment, out of alignment, or just questions on like, what I was saying, the things you need to do as you're doing your strategic planning? Or an example to share. I just find examples are always really helpful for everybody from a learning piece.
Maria, I find myself seeing that second out of alignment chart exactly where I'm at.
And so, okay, and you know what, Deanna, I appreciate you being, first off, so honest about that. Is it almost exactly the same components?
Similar. It's a new, very exciting program. I am new as the director, and we need to look at the board support and engagement and structure. We definitely need to relook at budget and our marketing, create a marketing plan, and yeah.
Has anything like fallen totally, or are you kind of like, okay, we could still get these into alignment?
No, nothing's fallen totally. We
Okay.
are definitely, yep.
But this is where, so those pieces you just talked about, those larger capacity components, as you start doing any kind of planning, whether it's a strategic plan that's 1 year, 3 years, 2 years, whatever, or maybe it's just a plan around one specific area. Sometimes I find doing like a strategic plan just for one table leg might be the way to go to kind of start building. And so it's not too overwhelming for everybody, because when you're out of alignment, time and money usually are really tight. I always tell everybody, consider just doing one, because they all affect each other. It's going to start like kind of organically building all the table legs then. So, pick which one is the one that's, keeping you up at night, the one that's waking you up at 2 a.m. Have conversation with others and start building that one. And you'll also see, and I'll give you some templates on how to start doing that, where it will then affect the others. And then you can kind of start, just organically transitioning to the other table legs as well. It is 10:45. We are going to take a 10-minute break because I know it's morning and I know people might have a call to make, or you had coffee earlier, or whatever it is. We're going to take a 10-minute break. Please jump back in 10 minutes. So that'll be at 10:55. We're going to go through some actual capacity questions, and you're going to get this on a handout you can take right to your organization, particularly if you want to tackle one table leg or all. And then we're going to go back into some breakout rooms where you can start talking about those as well. Sound good? Everybody, and yeah, we're going back to recording. And so the next pieces we're going to talk about is we want to talk about, okay, so now you've kind of identified your life cycle, or at least you understand what that means. You understand like the culture of planning and how you need to, really think about those capacity components before moving forward. And that said, also think about, well, what does that mean? Where do I start? So we talked about, before you start your actual strategic planning, that's going to be sustainable and something that you're going to use, and it won't just sit in the bookshelf. Where are we? Like, where's our organization sit? Are we startup? Are we growth? But we got this one table leg that needs a little attention. Or maybe we had some changes in our organization around our management or executive. And so we need to maybe focus on that for a bit. Or, we're going to start a new program and it's doing great, but our systems just aren't keeping up with it. How do we start this planning? Well, to figure that all out, you've got to start with some questions to figure out your capacity for the strategic planning. Excuse me, I've got allergies today. So I'm going to screen share again, and we're going to go to some real live capacity questions, and then we're going to do some break rooms where you guys can talk about these with each other, and we'll go from there. So hang on one sec, please. Okay. See the screen? Awesome. All righty. Capacity questions for strategic planning. Here they are. These are the basic ones. There's a whole lot of other ones, but and if any of you ever are interested in the Nonprofit Lifecycles book, it has like these pages right in the middle, these gold pages, I like to call them. They have just a myriad of questions. But these are the really big ones to just get you started every time before you do strategic planning or as you enter into your strategic planning phase. So first table leg of admin systems. Do you have SOPs, those standard operating procedures? They aren't just in your head. And are they kept fairly current? Or do you have manuals? I remember years ago, an organization I was with that we did vouchering for our daycare, for subsidized daycare. It was that same one I was explaining earlier that had all the problems. And then later I was at another of their facilities, and they were so far behind on vouchering because someone got sick and nobody knew the system. Nobody knew, like, is there just a checklist that somebody could pick up and do this? Maybe not do it as well as the person who usually did it, but something, that plan B. Our current technology and hardware, do they meet, or other tools, do they meet the organization's needs? There's nothing more frustrating for staff than when they don't have what they need to do their work. That's an admin system. It affects everything. Is there an expiring or expired strategic plan, and has it been reviewed? So one of the things you're going to want to do, let's say you're getting ready to do your strategic planning, if you already have a plan and it's expiring, everybody who's going to be working on the main part of the main core people on the next strategic plan should be reviewing the past one or the one that expires, or maybe it's an old one, you just haven't done one in a while, to see if there's any golden nuggets you want to carry over. Why do the work twice? But also, is it still relevant? Or what things did we never complete in here? Do we still want them in our next plan? You shouldn't just be throw it out. Figure that out. But that so many times I walk into an organization to do strategic planning and I'll say, have you, and they'll have had a past plan. Have you guys looked at it? They haven't even looked at it. Well, we're ready for a new one. You need to look at the old one first. Is there a written process in place for how you're going to execute the plan? So let's say, great strategic plan, you develop it. Okay, who's in charge of keeping it on task? Plans have to be flexible. You can't, sometimes you put the greatest thing in there and you have to change it. That's okay. But who's in charge of that? Who's in charge of communicating the planning to everybody? The pieces that might affect, oh, this piece affects this department. This piece affects our board. This piece, who's in charge? Who's keeping up on that? And how often are you going to revisit it? There should be a straight timeline in all plans of how often you're going to revisit. Is it to start, let's say it's a 3-year plan. You might say we're going to start revisiting every other month with our team or whoever, who's going to do it. Then it's going to go to quarterly. Then maybe the last year, it's going to be only every 6 months until the last 3, and then it's going to be every month because we're ending that plan. We want to make sure we're hitting everything. Or what are we going to carry to the next 3 years? And again, I strongly recommend nothing more than 3 years at this point. Our funding world is too volatile for anything else. I really strongly believe that. If you don't believe that, or just you're not sure and you want to still do a 5, that's fine. But I would make sure you have a lot of revisiting in it so that if you need to make changes, you can. And does the organization, do you have an evaluation plan and process for your programs? Any part of a good strategic plan includes an evaluation process. How are we going to evaluate what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, what the plan really isn't functioning with, what the plan, you know, what I should look like the next time we do this planning, and what needs to be changed. Also, your programs. You know, just because someone did a program well doesn't mean it's still needed. Doesn't mean it's still relevant. Got to look at that. If it's a slam dunk, yep, need that one, check it off, move on. If it's not, put that as part of your strategic planning to do a program assessment. Any questions, anything on that? Okay. The next one is your business model or your funding resources. First and foremost, is there are current revenue and expenses aligned with your operating budget? In other words, budget to actual. What you have in your budget currently what you're spending, what you're bringing in. Is it pretty, makes sense? Or maybe there's something a little off, but we know why. And, don't start your strategic planning until you've assessed that. If it's out of alignment, that's okay. That becomes that table leg that needs some really important focus. That's your first one. Is there finance reserves in place for operating capital? How many months? Now, this is really going to be probably aligned to your life cycle stage. If you are a mature organization or think you are, and again, when I say you, I'm talking about your organization. It's just easier to say it that way. If your organization believes it's in a life cycle of maturity, but does not have financial reserves, it is not in a life cycle of maturity. Those are the only ones that are more than likely going to have it. You might have some in growth, but how many months? It's okay if you don't even have a lot, but you need to know that going forward, because that means in your strategic planning, if you only have 0 goose egg extra money, do not do a 5-year strategic plan. You don't even know what your money looks like. Maybe do a 1 year with a revisit in 6 months to extend it to 2 years. If you have 3 months, like we could suffer through this waiting for our grant to come through for 3 months. You could probably do a 1.5, 2 year. By the way, don't forget either, it always doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4. I love an 18-month plan. I just feel like 18 months is a sweet spot. And then you revisit it at 1 year and keep building it. I just like to keep building. I don't like to do a new plan every time. That's a personal choice, but just throw it out there. Are there diverse sources of funding, or does the organization rely on only 1 or 2 funding sources? So 1 or 2 could be maybe a major grant and then individual donors, not one donor, but individual donors, collectively. That's fine. And the reason you want to know that is that's a capacity piece. You can't be in maturity with only 1 or 2. You can typically growth are not in 1 or 2 either. Growth usually have some, they're building that. Startup, absolutely. Decline, absolutely. Decline usually is like 1, or none, and they're hanging on by whatever they have that they're now spending. Turnaround, you're building them, but it just helps you to identify where you are or where that table leg might be specifically. Does the organization's model include any fee for service or entrepreneurship? The reason I say this is a good question to ask prior to beginning your strategic planning is because this is something, if you don't have it, you might want to start thinking about, is there a way we can do something that's a little off the beaten track? It's not related directly to our programs that could bring us in some money and be part of our planning. And we're going to build that out. It's not always about building services. Sometimes, funding is a program. Building funding is a program. And that could be like rental fees. Maybe you have space that you don't use if you own a building or something. It could be services or expert fees. I know of a pretty large organization in Syracuse that one of the things they do is they outsource if people need accounting, some basic stuff, they do that. If maybe a smaller organization needs that. Is it product sales? Those kind of things. Those are all fee or entrepreneurship. Like I was saying, Habitat for Humanity, Restore. So if it's already something you're doing, you want to talk about it, it needs to be part of your strategic planning as well. If it's not, are there any opportunities? That might be a way to build up your table leg around that. And then does the organization have a fund development plan? Okay, I really strongly feel this, and I'm just going to put it out there straight. Organizations have no business doing a strategic plan if they don't even have a fund development plan. And saying a strategic planning is not a fund development plan. A fund development plan is literally the funding sources you're going to go after. So it might be grants. It might be, and those can be foundations, private, corporate. I mean, there's so many, government. We're going to get 20% of our money from straight donors. We're going to do 30% from program vouchering if you have those type of programs. We have a fee for service or an entrepreneurship program that's going to bring in 15. And then we're going to involve our board. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to ask the board to ask 3 people every quarter for a donation or solicit corporations. We're going to have a matching gift. We're going to research and find out 3 businesses that do matching gifts for employees. That's a fund development plan. That is not a strategic plan. The reason I say you need a fund development plan before the strategic plan, and it's always done the other way, and I don't know why, is because you need the money to execute your strategic plan. If your strategic plan, which all of them include programming pieces, or should, or include staff and management, how are we going to be, meeting our management compensation packages, or maybe it's, hey, health insurance, which, just never seems to go down ever and is now just a quagmire and just a freaking, sand pit for every single nonprofit and small business. How are we going to meet that if we aren't even having a fund development plan? What do we need? And that's why the first item up here about current revenue expenses is so important to ask first, because then you know what you need. If you know, we're probably, crap, sorry. I have no idea why I have a trigger finger today, but clearly I do. No, I really got to go through this. Okay. If you have no idea what your expenses and things look like and your revenue, and you have no fund development plan, I'm not really sure how you could do a great strategic plan. I think you can put the right things down that you should be doing, but I don't think you can execute it. And that's going to be really frustrating for everybody involved. So this is a really important piece. Next questions, governance and board. Does the board perform, or has it done a recent evaluation of the CEO or executive director? And is any of that based on the past strategic plan, if you have one? Like, is that in there? That should be in your strategic plan of what the frequency is, who will be looking at it. It's a real problem building capacity when you're not assessing the person who's executing or responsible for executing things. It's also a real issue with growth and startups, especially. It doesn't happen. You got to figure that out. You got to put it in there, even if it's a really small evaluation. It's a way to engage your exec. It's a way to keep them. It's also important because if there's something not going right, you need to have that conversation earlier than later. Does your composition of your board meet your needs? So we did talk about that earlier with like workers and governing, but the talents, does it meet the needs? If you have an organization that works with children and has some real concerns around maybe children's mental health, do you have anybody on your board with that expertise? Or maybe it's a committee. It doesn't always need to be a board member. So where I use the word board here, just for sake of space, it can be a committee too. That's all governing body. Okay. Do you have, if you need a lawyer, okay, do you have somebody? I personally don't like having a lawyer on a board, and this is why, not because I'm against lawyers. If I need a lawyer, there's a conflict of interest if there's a lawyer on the board, and then I'm going to need him to do work as a lawyer. That's a conflict of interest. It doesn't work. I'd rather have them on a committee where they're non-voting, or just hire who I want. Do I have the needs? Does my board represent who I serve? If you are serving a certain part of the community, whether it be a regional part, whether it be maybe serving parents of children with disabilities, intellectual or physical, whatever it might be, do you have people at the table who you're serving? Because you should. Now, I know with some government grants, it's required. For instance, with a lot of government grants around housing or community development, they will require someone from the community, like different community leaders or people in the neighborhoods, to be on it. But that's not always the case. I'm not really sure, like if I was maybe working with an organization that worked with food insecurity. I don't have food insecurity in my household. I'm not really sure I could make great decisions around that programmatically if I don't have someone on my committee or a board who can speak to it. So this is where we throw out the idea of board members for capacity who only have high paying or really visible positions. because they can't speak to some of these needs. If your organization has that need, you need to have at least 1 or 2 people or some percentage, whatever you determine, which is part of your strategic plan, of people of your community need at the table. I just don't understand how you do it otherwise, because you can't speak to it. And the whole thing about, well, this is a whole other piece. It's in the board development series, the workshops we do in the fall. But the whole thing around, well, you can't ask people who work a lot of hours to sit on a board. That's crap. You're devaluing them. You don't know that they don't want to sit on that board, or they don't have the money to make a donation. I don't care if they make a $5 donation. If that's if that's $5 means as much as that to them as someone with $500, it's all the same. And trust me, I've had arguments with people about this, but I personally feel that because I did not come from wealth. I did not come from highly educated or visible background. I sat on my first board at age 21, and what I could do was I was a worker bee. I could do lots of stuff, and I saw lots of other people like me doing the same thing. And I could take up those spots and leave that other for other people. So don't diminish that, but it's also important because you need to have people who understand the work. Does the board have, the board do a self-evaluation? Boards should do at least every other year their own self-evaluation. What are they doing? How well are they doing it? What do they need to be doing? Who do they need on their board? Are they training their board members on an ongoing basis? Are they providing education and opportunities for board members? It's not just about the board serving the organization. People want to be on boards to gain knowledge, education, help their community. If your board hasn't had a recent evaluation, it either needs to be something entered into the strategic plan to become an execution action task, or an action task to execute, or if they haven't had one, or if they have had recent one, were there any deficiencies identified by the board, by themselves, that they've now corrected, or does it need to go into the plan? This is preparation that already sets your plan in motion. That's why I love it. It doesn't have to. You take what you learn from these questions and then you start your plan. Because sometimes the starting point is the hardest part of strategic planning. Okay, so the next one is, does the board understand its fiduciary responsibilities, have benchmarks to evaluate? Do board committees, do you have the right board committees for growth? And have bylaws been reviewed prior to the start of any strategic plan? They really should be. Because sometimes your bylaws need to be changed. It's easy now. It's not a big deal anymore like it used to be. And it's really important because they are the governing document of the organization. No sense putting something in a strategic plan that the bylaws need to be changed first, like adding a committee or something like that, if your bylaws require that. The last one is management staff. Is there adequate staffing to meet current program needs and objectives? Because if there's not adequate staffing right now, and you're going to put some new goals and objectives in your strategic plan, it's very, very important that you know what it is before going in. If it is, you're already meeting it, okay, you're ready to roll on that. Are performance evaluations done regularly for staff? You don't even know what they are, just are they done regularly? Or that needs to become a process within your strategic planning that you're going to implement. Maybe it's not a deficiency. It's because your organization is growing. So you only had like 1 or 2 staff. There weren't like regular, consistent performance evaluations or a process. But part of your strategic planning is going to be adding a program that's going to bring you to 5 staff. Then you need to make sure there's a process that part of your strategic plan is we're going to add in a evaluation process at this timeline, who's going to do it for our staff. And that actually transitions back to your admin systems. That's why I said so many times one table leg will affect another. A regular time studies done for positions. Again, depends where you are in your life cycle, but it's something as you grow to think about, or if you're in maturity or growth, should be there. How will the staff or volunteers be involved in the strategic planning process? Are you going to have a team of people? Are you going to have a special ad hoc committee, just like a committee just for this process? Are staff going to be part of evaluating or revisiting the strategic plan on a regular basis? This needs to be conveyed. It also buys staff loyalty to the strategic plan. Because trust me, many times strategic planning, all it does is add to the staff's, there's things that the staff have to do. And they're like, great, I don't even know what this is about. I'm now stuck with this. They need to have, even if they're not highly involved, there needs to be communication around your planning and the final strategic plan. And then what critical skill sets or talents are needed in your staff or management or volunteers for the future? That all needs to be questioned now, even if you don't have the solid answers on all of it. Some you will, like, do we have a fund development plan? That's a yes or a no. But some will be, let's think about this. Let's put some notes down. You're going to get this sheet, by the way, as a handout. Let's put some notes down, and that's where we start our strategic plan. That's where we figure out what are the pieces we want to put in. Does that make sense? Is there any questions around this as using this as your jumping off point for, particularly for the like 60% of organizations in here that do not have a strategic plan? Is it clear? Maybe you can show a thumbs up or not. It's okay too. Is it clear this would be a good, this is how you could start? And you could certainly add or, to it as well. So you kind of figure out your life cycle. This helps you figure it out too, by the way, a little bit. Like I said, you can't be a mature organization and not have reserves, financial reserves. All right, well, if everybody's clear, and certainly I threw a lot in here. This is a big one. This is a lot. But I feel like even if you pick or choose one or two questions out of each, it's a great place to get started. We're going to go into some breakout rooms. And I think Colby or Corey, I'm not sure which one has the next question to put up. It's going to be based around these, not the detail of the questions, but we're going to go into breakout rooms. And what we're looking for is, are you guys, and I'm going to pull the chat up. What we're looking for is there one table leg or capacity component that can, right here at the bottom, that can bring you back to your leadership team or team as a starting point for strategic planning. So is there one table leg or capacity component based on these questions? Think about them, take a look a little more, that you could bring back to your organizations, either who's going to do strategic planning, or maybe you haven't figured that out yet. Maybe it's other people on your management, or maybe it's your board, or maybe it's your whole staff if you're smaller, that you could bring back and say, let's talk about these questions as a starting point. I'd love for you guys to dive into this as a peer learning. And we're going to break you into breakout rooms, and you'll get that little signal too when it's going to end. And then we'll come back, and I'm hoping you guys can give me some input, and we can share some ideas and thoughts around this. And if there is one, why? We want to know. It'll help us out too. All righty, breaking out, and I'll try to visit.
I sent it to you directly, so.
Maria, we should be all set.
Okay, great. Hey, everybody. And I got to jump into, I think, almost every room. I think I might have missed, I wasn't able to get to one of them. It was just timing out then. But thank you so much for good conversation. I've taken some notes here, and I might even like hit up on some of you and ask you to kind of give a few comments. I appreciated the conversation, and I love that some of you were sharing, just all kinds of different things, and making sure that you were sharing information, and some of you were even talking about what's kind of going on in your own organization, and going back and forth. So I appreciate that. So with regard to a couple of the questions and kind of that led off, and the capacity component that some of you felt needed attention in your organization, one group, one person in particular was talking about the staff and their talents and the right fit, because the programs are so important, and making sure that they had those pieces there. And Leona, I think it was your group that was talking about that. Could you add anything to that, just of why that would be a capacity question you really need to address as you look into strategic planning around the staff and their talents, why that would be important?
Yeah, sure. I feel like so with having a very small leadership team and then having staff that have been here 18 years, 15, 18
Mm-hmm.
years, we have really progressed and got to know each other and developed a model for our programs, for our finance, right, for our board. Like we've
Yeah.
created this culture. And I think it's very important that as we continue to do strategic plans, or right now we're in a bridge plan,
Mm-hmm.
that we really look at making sure that, you specialists want to work with kids all day, right?
Yep.
Making
Yep.
sure that we have the skill set on our boards to understand that when you apply for state grants, you don't get them right away and you have to have money up front and there's timing issues with vouchering.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of those things, we want to make sure when you're bringing people in, leadership or even staff, that they really have the talents of this nonprofit culture. Because I think it just helps everything work better.
Yeah, no, that makes great sense. And when you have already assessed that and looked at it up front, then as you're doing your strategic planning, you can look at those other pieces that tie into staff, tie into management, and it would make great sense. So I appreciate you sharing that. And right, and also something you said that's completely critical and vital is to make sure the staff are, believe in the mission. Like you've got the right people at the table for that. This is hard work, regardless of its strategic planning, regardless of what life cycle you're in. If you're in startup, if you were in turnaround, even the staff have to believe in the work. If that's not why they're there, you're probably never going to have great success with them. So that was a great point to bring out, Winona. Thank you, Winona. Thank you so much. Um, Another one, a lot of you were talking about board governance, table leg. I totally get it. As I was saying earlier, it took me a long time to realize without that table leg being strong, everything suffers. And a few of you were talking, I'll give a couple of the ideas, and you were talking about board self-evaluation, that capacity question, and then where that has led. And somebody made the comment or suggestion, and something they do in their organization. Sometimes it's a great idea to first put someone who wants to join the board, ask them to be on a committee. It's a wonderful pipeline to your board, but it's also where you get to see if they are really engaged, if they are a follow through person. I know someone earlier in the first break room was talking about, I give them the job, but how do I know they're going to get it done? Or how do I know they're going to get it done in the timely manner we need? And that's where you set expectations. You give information. You say, this is what we need. This is when we need it by. This is what we're looking for from you. So in doing that self-evaluation, the board can do that. Another person said they kind of aren't doing a lot of committee. They don't do a lot of board things. They do ad hoc committees, not standing committees. Again, really great way. Nobody wants to sit on a committee that isn't relevant or needed. That can be a capacity issue because you will lose board members if you're not looking at that. So great conversation. I think, like I said, even if you take one table leg and start with that, I know one organization's very, very startup. Get that board strong or your committee strong, and then move forward. So I'm going to go back to sharing as we wrap up and go to the next pieces. And there we go. Hopefully you can all see this. Okay. This is a flow chart, and it literally, you're going to get this as a one-page handout. So I'm not going to go through it super heavily, and it looks a little more crazy than it is, but it's a play to, again, visual, get people involved. So you're going to do some strategic planning, or maybe you can do some program planning or assessment before you even strategic plan. Or maybe, especially for you startup growth organizations, somebody comes in with an opportunity, new program, new grant, new funder, whatever it is. First thing you're going to do is this flow chart. Is it mission driven? If it's not mission driven, stop. Throw it out. Don't waste time. It's over. If it doesn't need to be reframed, or does it go into the trash? Okay, let's say it's mission driven. Let's say it's a new program. I don't know, a children's program, you're a youth center, children's program, something with physical health in kids. Does it enhance business leverage? Now we're talking business model. Does it enhance or develop our competitive advantage or brand? Again, that goes down to public relations and funding. If it's a no, you stop. Oh, crap. I did it again, guys. I will be the consultant you'll remember forever for this. Get through. So is it something that you can, is it something that increases your advantage, your brand? Nobody needs to have six organizations in the community doing the same thing. If yes, discuss how. Your team, and then go to capacity. If not, you stop it, or maybe recycle. Maybe you have to tweak it a little. Go to capacity then. These are the 4 table legs. Do you have the capacity to do it? Do you have the money? Do you have the team? Or what do you need? Do you have the systems? And do you have the board as approval? Or what do they need? If not, stop. And if not, you might just need to reframe it as well. If it's all yes, and you can do it, you've got the capacity. Does it benefit who we serve, whether it's membership, clients, or organization's goals? If it's no, stop it. If it needs no and it needs reframing, or do that. But if not, it goes in the trash. If it's yes to all this, it meets your mission. It's smart for business. You have the capacity, or you can build the capacity. It benefits who you serve. All that, you start your action work plan. And here it is. This is the simplest way to begin your strategic planning with this as well. You fill out here what the action item is. So let's say I'm an idiot and did that again. I give up. And for whatever reason, there we go. It came back this time. Let's say it's to build that new program, a youth program, but you don't have quite enough staff. First action item is, what staff do we need? Build a job description. Next action item, and these are all your table legs. What's it going to affect? Who is responsible for building that job description? What's the time frame on it? When do we want to accomplish it by? You can share this with your team. It's simple. This is how you can build a strategic plan, even if you aren't ready for a full strategic plan. You can build these chunks out and then put it in a strategic plan, or you can just work with an action plan. Sometimes it's that simple. If you're only dealing with one table leg, maybe you're just starting there, especially a lot of startups in this group today, I say go with an action plan. Okay, you hire some. Next is the hiring process. Setting compensation. That's where the board gets involved. They have to look at the budget. What do our financials look like? What can we do? What's going to be the onboarding and hiring process for that person? Who is accountable? What's the time frame? All these pieces can go in an action plan. So even a fund development plan. Remember I said if you don't have a fund development plan yet, you might want to think about that before a strategic plan. You could start your fund development planning. Maybe it's we want to have 5 grants we apply for a year. That's an action item. Who's going to do it? Who's going to research them? What does that look like, and what's the time frame? And oh, by the way, what table legs does it affect? It might be one more than others. It might be all, whatever. It's a way to also post this for your team and say, here's what we just accomplished. It's a way to also build momentum, build loyalty, and build morale. So for really early organizations in their growth phase, really startup, or those that are turning around, sometimes doing an action work plan for one item is a way to start chunking it out, making it something that seems doable, and actually identifying expectations, action work items, initiatives and goals, and who's going to do them. And oh, gee, I think we're going to have to be flexible. That one's not going to work. You go back and change it. You're going to get this sample as well as a Word document, so you can modify it to work however it does for you. No bad feelings if you decide to modify it, but however it works for your organization or even a small committee and boards, you can use this too for your goals and initiatives. This is a great way to do it simply. So you take all that, and where do you start? Preparation. How do I start my strategic plan? You assess the life cycle, even if it's a mini assessment on your own. You ask those capacity questions. If you're only going to chunk it out and do one thing to get started because the other just too much to start with, that's okay. But start with one set of capacity questions or one or two questions. You involve your stakeholders, that's your staff, your board, your funders or program maybe you're somebody who your program partners with another organization, involve them. And share the results with the stakeholders, all those same folks, all those same groups. Step 2 is strategic plan, the actual planning. And again, it could be a full plan, or it could be after you've done the questions and all that, it could be just an action grid. Create a key team, even if it's an action type of just 1 page or 2 pages for one piece. Create a leadership or action team. Can't do this just the executive or just a board president. There has to be a team. I love a team that's comprised of both governance and staff or volunteers. I think it's a great way to get a lot of perspectives, or a community partner. Determine the length of your plan. These are just examples, 2-year, 3-year, 5-year, I've talked about it. Or if it's an action item, determine we want to complete all this in 6 months. Don't forget though, you've got to be flexible. It's a liquid plan. Hold planning and strategy sessions. Define them, 1 hour, 90 minutes, define them. This is what we're going to work on. We're going to take the plan and move forward. Don't turn into this free for all of brainstorming. You'll get nothing done. You'll just have a lot of people and one person will dominate the whole thing then. Develop a written strategic plan with an action work plan, or just the action work plan. You have to have an action plan. A strategic plan without an action plan, again, can get very stale very quickly. Make sure you include in that in the execution piece that's next. So how do I execute all this? I'm creating the team. I'm holding the sessions. I'm developing that action work plan or strategic plan. We're sharing it. And then you have a check-in schedule with benchmarks. That should be part of the plan. The action work plan should include, we are going to check in at, or we are going to make modifications every 3 months, or maybe we don't need to, whatever it might be. Any thoughts or questions on that? Like, this is the layout. You'll again get this in the handout. And modify it to work for your organization. But the best way to know how to modify it is by knowing exactly where your life cycle is. So we have to wrap up. You guys have been wonderful. I see a lot of people thinking this is a lot of information. I get it. So the good news is, for the next 2 weeks, if you want to contact me, you'll have this in your handout via this email, and you'll have it in the recording as well. There's an email there. If it's related to this session, you are welcome to email me, and I will get back to you with an email within usually like 3 business days with any answers, or maybe it's like, hey, do you have a template or a sample of something? I'm happy to share always. And also, here's your QR code. It will be in the recording as well. This is in the slide deck. If you fill this out within 24 hours, scan and fill it out and do the survey. This is really helpful to the foundation. These surveys are critical to them knowing what to present, what's needed, what works, what doesn't, so they best meet your needs. If you fill this out, Colby, was it within 24 hours? You'll be entered in a drawing that the foundation will do.
Yep.
And
by noon tomorrow.
And then they'll notify the winner, and you'll get 1 hour of consulting time with me virtual. And it has to be used by June 30th.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, I got it right. Yeah. So I am so appreciative both to the foundation for letting me present this. I feel, this is my life's work, and for the last 20 years. And I strongly, I'm always learning too. Whenever I meet with organizations or get to present a session like this, I learn more that I can then take into my work. So I very much appreciate the opportunity, and I appreciate all of you. As I said, this is a lot of information, and you guys have been really, really wonderful. And just sharing and learning and just, the peer learning, as I said, is always important. And it's always great to see so many great different types of groups attend too. So thank you so much. And I'm just hoping you'll have a great rest of the day and great rest of the week and that it gets warm.
Well, Maria, thanks so much. If we were all in person, I would have everyone give you a round of applause, but I'm sure everyone's doing that wherever they are. So
Thank you. Thank you. So, and thank you to the whole team at the foundation too for all the technology and all the information ahead of time and the great planning. It's been wonderful.
yeah, well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending. Again, please feel free to reach out to Maria. You have access to this email for 2 weeks, you said, Maria.
Yep.
So any questions you have, feel free to run by her or reach out to the foundation as well if there's anything we can help with. Otherwise, yeah, thank you all for coming. We'll hope to see you at the next one.
Bye, everybody.